first of all, welcome everybody who is joining us from home or their office or wherever you may be. Today it's we have some really interesting speakers on hand today, and I'm really excited to talk to everybody about today's topic, which is on-set virtual production technology. And we're going to dive into everybody's real life, kind of behind the scenes experience using tools to help create stories on film sets and for broadcasts and anything that captures storytelling and actors and that type of stuff. So I will be your moderator today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Chris Beddick. I own a company, or two companies. One's called Perspective Films, where I'm a cinematographer, and I do a lot of behind the scenes work on shows. I also do documentaries. I have a vast experience as a cameraman, documentaries and sports and entertainment and ET Canada and that kind of stuff. Sort of been doing this for about 20 years. About 2013, I discovered Oculus headset on Kickstarter and started building 360 cameras and went to Brazil and started shooting their World Cup and hanging out at a couple of the places there to shoot some content and just sort of experimenting. And I built my own 360 SLR cameras and created a project called VR Wonders of the World that used motion control time-lapse, project called VR Wonders of the World. And I've helped companies like the Canucks, Vancouver Canucks and BC Lions create their very first 360 experience. I've worked on projects with Facebook Watch and Sacred Lies and Disney and Netflix and Make-A-Wish and a bunch of others. So I've got a bit of a background using my cinematography experience and then jumping into sort of the immersive 360 landscape, not using game engine, but using 360 cameras. So I'm really excited about today because I've seen virtual production sort of come along from Oblivion to Mandalorian, and it seems like in the last year there's been a lot of people talking about virtual production, and I've been interested in domes and the creative tools and interested in how can we create really impactful stories using these tools. And today is really a story about everyone on the panel who's worked with the tools and the technology to tell the stories that really are impactful. So I want to dig in and start introducing us to the panel members we have here today. So I'm just going to go through them quickly, introduce them, and then they'll talk about themselves. So we have Athomas Goldberg, who's a co-executive director of Shocap Entertainment. They've done live performance captures, interactive VR. They worked on a project called Jill Barber. Was it you worked on the
Jill Barber live at the Palomar? Yep.
Yeah, and you've done some stuff with. And I'll let you talk about the circus and all their stuff. So just want to introduce you and thank you for joining us today. And I want to introduce Renee Amador. He's from ARwall. He's a co-founder and chief executive officer. They do a lot of cool stuff with virtual production, green screen, live recording, and he'll sort of talk about all the juicy stuff he's done. And Maud Clavier, who's a VR specialist. She's worked in 360 and VR production since 2015. Some live broadcasts. She's well noted for her Jean-Michel Jarre, who's an artist who had 75 million views on a project she created or helped create. Was it this past New Year's for a project called Welcome to the Other Side? Was it this New Year's?
Yeah, it was a month ago.
Awesome. Not too long ago, so very recent. And we have Stype Cajic, who's the founder of Stype, who they manufacture some products to help with content on newscasts and game shows and sports, and he'll sort of get into all the cool stuff he does. So let's sort of go through. Did I miss anyone? I think that we have everybody.
That's all of us.
Perfect. So let's start with Athomas. Athomas, can you just want to do a quick introduction of yourself? Maybe for about 2 minutes, talk about the projects you've worked on topic on hand and sort of your experiences, and I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. So I've been working primarily in interactive entertainment and VR for the better part of the past 27 years, though I actually began my career doing as a lighting designer in New York, doing live music, theater, and dance, and that's really kind of where my history began. But as I said, for the past 27 years, I've been working primarily in interactive entertainment. I was in Electronic Arts for a number of years, where I oversaw this internal animation technology, in-game interactive animation technology development. For the past 7 or so years, I've been consulting into interactive entertainment and VR. through my company Lifelike and Believable Animation Design. And one of our principal clients has been Oculus VR. I've been involved in a number of projects there. And then during that same period, over the last few years, I've also been involved in producing live performances, mostly in front of live audiences that have combined real-time performance capture with real-time rendering and projection. And so in the past, about 2 years ago, I began a project in collaboration with Animatrix Film Design, which is one of a performance capture studio here in Burnaby, and one of the largest performance capture studios in North America, to produce a full-length show involving combining circus performance and real-time motion capture. We approached the Montreal-based circus company, the Seven Fingers. They've been around for about 20 years now, toured internationally, and performed kind of all over the world. Basically with this proposal to do this show that would take, really the circus performance at the highest, at the highest level of performance, and build a show around that. And so from there, we submitted a proposal to Epic for a mega grant around this project, which we received. And then in combination with some funding from the Canada Media Fund and Creative BC, we began what became to be known as Project Lavici with the Seven Fingers. And so really what we've been doing over the past year has really been focusing on the virtual production technology specific to live performance and specific to addressing kind of what we call the four audience model for live virtual performance. And and that is, how do we produce shows in which performers will present their work in front of a live audience in a theater, as we began this project pre-COVID and expect to continue it post-COVID. And how do we leverage these techniques to drive projections that accompany that live performance, but at the same time, how do we take the content that we're creating to you in order to create these projections, and then simultaneously create an experience in which remotely connected viewers can then enter the world of those projections and engage in that level. And then simultaneously, can we also provide a curated cinematic view, sort of cinematic of live stream of that of that performance. And so those are really, as I said, that four audience model, which is on stage, online, in game, and in VR. And it's been really encouraging to see things like like what Maud and company did with Jean-Michel Jarre to really kind of embrace this idea of reaching people in a variety of different platforms, in a variety of different ways, with experiences that complement each other rather than sort of compete with each other. So that's what we're doing, and we're continuing to do it, and we're really excited about the possibilities.
Perfect. Are you based in Vancouver, Burnaby?
We are based in Vancouver.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Renee, let's talk about what you're doing behind the scenes. We'll try and keep it like 2 to 3 minutes kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Renee, do you want to sort of give us a heads up on a little bit of a bio and on sort of your past experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background prior to joining ARwall, I was a filmmaker. I directed about 350 commercial short films and pilots. A lot of those were pretty visual effects heavy, lots of green screen, lots of compositing. Because I had a background as a visual effects artist myself, it ended up being me a lot of times doing some of the final visual effects work. So in those moments of frustration, both as a visual effects artist and as a filmmaker, we thought, me and my team thought, well, what would compositing and effects look like if it was invented today with the spatial imaging technology that we have today? And we formed ARwall and launched a product called AR Effects about 4 years ago with that in mind. And that ended up being one of the first products or one of the first offerings for film and TV using LED backdrops, projection backdrops, and that type of stuff. And we've since expanded to do all virtual production, basically green screen, live stream, LED backdrops, projection backdrops, all sorts of different stuff. Kind of the new stuff that we're up to, lots of live streams, lots of AR overlays and objects and that type of stuff, as well as integrating with some of the top professional technology providers out there. Stype, who's here on the panel with us, is one of the tracking technologies we integrate with. And that's basically my background. I'm a creator myself. These are tools that we generated and offerings we've made mostly for people like ourselves, filmmakers and creators. And we really see it, this technology as a tool that's for the creators, for the director, for the DP. And then I think also what we're finding is it's a very powerful tool for the production designer and set designers on projects as well. So that's all about me.
Perfect. And where are you based out of?
We are in Burbank, California, just north of LA.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Maud, do you sort of just want to give us a quick rundown of your past experiences and this little exciting project you just did with Welcome to the Other Side? Welcome to the Other Side. Just want to give us a quick sort of run through about yourself?
Yeah, so I built a production company in 2014. I fell in love with 360 video in 2015 when I heard about it. I did very quickly a short film that I produced that was one of the first one. It was showcased in Cannes Film Festival. Then I ran my company for 4 years doing a lot of 360 commercials for many brands. And as they had money, I could experience really storytelling in this format and go further and further. And when I quitted my company in 2018, I started to try to be an artist myself. So I did few 360 documentaries that went to Fivers and other festivals, VR days and so on. And next to that, I've been a freelancer doing project management for many VR projects that were very different. Some were for museums, other for performing arts, other for production company. And when the COVID arrived, I became really fascinated about social VR. So those virtual reality platforms where we can meet as avatars and live events together. And I started to work with VRROOM, that is a company specialized into that, doing custom worlds for brands, festivals, and entertainment. I work with VRROOM now since last July. We have done Venice VR Expanded. That is the virtual edition of Venice International Film Festival. We've done new images and Creative XR and few projects for festivals, and now we are working on Southwest. And the last project we did for Jean-Michel Jarre was called Welcome to the Other Side, and it was a very ambitious one, because we mixed real images of Jean-Michel Jarre in the studio. We mixed images in a virtual world in VRchat, and another software creating the facade of Notre Dame. So I was the project manager on that, and I was also the film director within VR to broadcast on TV.
Awesome. Kind of a wide, you wore many hats.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Jake in all trade, as we say.
Yeah,
and I'm based in France, for your information. But I used to come often in Vancouver. That's why I know a bit the Vancouver professionals.
Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Now let's talk with Stype. Stype, can you just sort of give us a little rundown on sort of your background related to our topic?
Yes, so we are based, we have an office also in very close to Burbank, but also in Norway, Croatia, Herzegovina. The background, so what we do is we design and manufacture camera tracking systems. Our most popular product is RedSpy camera tracking. It is an optical camera tracking device, which is like the very high-end camera tracking that you can have. On the low end, you will see usually people using HTC Vives, things like that. But at some point, people realize the limitations and that it may be unreliable in all positions and all that. But RedSpy, the way it works is, this work principle guarantees some reliability, because what we do is RedSpy is a small infrared camera, which is basically and you also have retroreflective markers that you stick onto a ceiling or a floor. So basically, this infrared camera is looking at the constellation of these markers, and as you move around, it recognizes where it is automatically at all times. And since those markers are very, I don't know, cheap, so you can cover the complete room without problems, the system is very reliable. There are no blind spots. You can go wherever you want, and it's really reliable, and that's why it's currently the world's most popular camera tracking system with broadcasters, and more and more it's used on the movie sets. And yeah, so in general, we also have other projects which I will talk about later. This is just the introduction. So that's what we do. We do tracking, camera tracking.
Awesome, thank you. So for those who've just joined us, I just want to sort of bring you in from 36,000 feet in the air down to where we are in the space and time with virtual production, more specifically on-set virtual production technology. Everyone on the panel has had some amazing experiences that we're going to dive into about their experiences. And for most people probably are familiar with virtual production. If you're not, you may have seen Oblivion or familiar with Disney's Mandalorian, where they're using LED or LCD screens in the background as a virtual set. I've been on a few where I've been on many sets as a camera operator, and real sets have an advantage. I've been on Blood and Chrome with Stargate movie. There's a Stargate movie, and it was all green screen. So there are some plus and minuses for the actors. So we're going to kind of get into how that affects the actors, how it affects the techs. Now that we've got Oblivion and Mandalorian, and now with COVID, there's some challenges with production all over the world, and it seems like virtual production has come a long way and helped productions with the new problems. So with technology, there's cycles. There's emerging, there's growth, there's maturity, decline. Every technology and product has a cycle it goes through. For example, 3D TVs had a really quick emerging, growth, and maturity and decline cycle. I'm a fan of virtual production. I'm learning more about it every day. I don't think it's going anywhere soon. It's not a 3D TV. It's here for a very long time. It's probably going to grow. That's my opinion. But I'm very curious on where everyone thinks we are right now in March 2021. Are we at an emerging stage? Are we at a growth stage? Are we a maturity stage? How do you see virtual production helping and being efficient? Just sort of a general, like, where we are in the space with virtual production. Who wants to sort of talk about where we are in history of virtual production, how it's helping TV sets and news sets and all that? Who wants to
I can speak on that.
Sure.
If you like. So right now we're in an interesting time. There's a few trends that are happening. One is that everybody seems to know what virtual production is, which is definitely different from how we were maybe 12 months ago, or even like 6 months ago. Everybody seems to be aware of the technology, be aware that this is being used professionally. The second trend that we're kind of seeing right now, and maybe this gives you an idea of where we are in the history, is that currently there are not enough tools or people out there to accomplish the demand in the marketplace, particularly when it comes to things like GPUs, even CPUs or other components in some cases, tracking technology, that type of stuff. We're currently in a shortage. So, we're in a position where we're waiting months, oftentimes, for new equipment and that type of stuff. Stype might have more insight in what's going on there in the international supply chain. But definitely, I think we're in the point now where we're tooling up, and there is kind of an arms race happening between different providers, between different studios, regions, to figure out how do we actually get up and running on this technology. So I think we're in a very fast growth stage, probably the fastest that we've seen. What we're seeing is all of our partners basically are busy right now, probably going to continue to be busy through Q2 and Q3. So that's the vision from the ground floor.
Is it fair to say that COVID probably increased that growth? Is that a fair comment?
I think even more than that. I would say that that there was probably even a downtrend happening at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a downtrend happening because productions were feeling a little bit cautious, and there was a question mark of like what's actually going to happen. And then once people realized that virtual production was going to be the solution for those concerns, reducing people on set, reducing company moves and travel, that type, those are the main ones. Then there was a massive surge. I would say it started in our own experience. It started about August, September of last year.
And this surge is happening because
I think the surge is happening mainly for those two reasons I mentioned.
Yeah.
It cuts down on travel and company moves, and then it also cuts down on the number of people on set because they're all those carpenters and everything that are actually going to be making the physical sets. Those people aren't involved anymore, or not as many of them.
Does anyone else want to touch on this?
I mean, building on what Renee is saying, I think that in addition to the demand outstripping supply for hardware, I think we're all feeling it in terms of how long we've got to wait for NVIDIA cards, et cetera. We're also in a place where demand for experienced sort of talent has also far outstripped demand. The ability to find people who actually have the experience or expertise in these technologies and in these pipelines has become has really kind of gone through the roof and has made if you don't have dedicated expertise in house, finding people you can bring in on a moment's notice to support these kind of efforts is becoming increasingly difficult.
Bottom line is this is not going away anytime soon, meaning virtual production.
Yeah, and I would add it's very popular in the music industry also. It's becoming more and more popular because the music industry was suffering before from being unpaid, for artists not being able to perform. And now they are all asking for virtual production. Like I have many ones.
Which I think leads us into the next question, which is the perfect segue, is how are the use of real-time technologies impacting how live talent can enhance their performance?
It's a very large question, but if you allow me to answer first, I'm basing my answers on the Jean-Michel Jarre experience. But Jean-Michel Jarre was having a mock-up capture suit, and he was performing with his instrument. So he's an electronic music performer, and his avatar couldn't have the same aura as he does in real life. Of course, you are through an avatar, so you're losing a bit of your performance. But the way we were gaining interest was in the way we could film that and make the immersion be in a very particular place, because we built the concert inside the Cathedral of Notre Dame, that is a very known monument in the world and that has been destroyed. So it was really historical. If you were in VR, you could see Jean-Michel Jarre. That was not as great as seeing Jean-Michel Jarre in real life, but you could be in the environment with him, which is very enriching for the moment. And on TV, we were doing a film of that was quite original and acting like a video clip. So in a way, we had less of him being really in front of the camera with his aura, but we have more in the way we could film it and broadcast it and the places we have. That's why it's important to have great knowledge of the virtual techniques and all the hardware we can have, and the knowledge we have is important to increase the performing art in the virtual space, because there's a lot of bad experience also, so we have to be careful.
So I'm assuming you pitched this idea, correct?
It was before, like Jean-Michel Jarre did a first VR project for the music festival in France in June. Yeah. So the boss of VRROOM, who's Louis, is the one who pitched the project to Jean-Michel, but he was very interested because he always has been very ahead technologies. He's an innovator. He's having millions of people to his concert, doing laser shows. And so he jumped into it very straight away. And it was hard. It was more work to convince other artists who's working with him, like his light designer. It was the first time he was doing light designing inside VR. He has been his light designer for 5 years. And it was such a challenge to put to find a common workflow with the virtual people, for him to have his tools, to find his spotlights, to organize them. But finally, one of the reasons the virtual show was so great is because of this real life staging people that were behind the project or so.
One of the challenges I had with starting off fairly early making 360 content is that the technology itself, like I'm building cameras that are literally power supplies are burning, there was the challenge. And then, so there was the technology challenge, which I think virtual production has now passed that stage. I think that's fair to say, but there's shortages, so there's still some challenges. Then it got into, well, how do I pitch this to the Vancouver Canucks when I've got nothing to show them? So for everybody who's on the panel, you know, you are considered still trailblazers in a sense. And as they say, trailblazers sometimes end up with the face flat in the ground with arrows in your back. There is extra stresses that come along with new technology, and you know, the challenges of not having the right cameras or not having the availability of the NVIDIA cards and all that stuff. I just want to talk about sort of the challenges you're facing right now behind the scenes, with whether it's talent, you know, not having enough talent or talent who knows what they're doing, or the equipment, just sort of the overall challenges that you guys have seen trying to create the content. You know, TV, for example, there's sort of a formatic, you know, let's get the master, let's get the tights. There's sort of a flow, there's a production workflow that's what's film 120 or 140 years old, whatever it is. We're still relatively new. What are the biggest challenges right now facing virtual production?
So, you know, I mean, I think that there's, you know, there are different sets of challenges depending on whether the work you're doing is intended for sort of live presentation, like the work that Maud and I are doing, or whether it's intended, you know, part of a, you know, sort of film or television virtual production pipeline. I can speak a little bit to the live performance side of things, and I think that there's, you know, there are two sort of key areas where the challenges exist, and you know, there's a set of creative challenges and a set of technical challenges. You know, on the creative side, and I think, you know, sort of Maud really, you know, you really hit it, is, you know, there's whether we're live streaming or creating an immersive performance using performance capture, there is a level of remove that we're introducing between the audience and the artist. And so, you know, we're not going to completely recreate the experience of being, you know, in an arena surrounded by thousands of fans, you know, viewing the performer sort of live. And I think it's, you know, it's a mistake if we try to simply recreate that. You know, but where the opportunity is, you know, is in using these technologies to create a sense of place that's very different from, you know, simply the arena experience. It becomes, you know, a different kind of experience of the live performance that has its own sort of story behind it, and its own, you know, and its own, you know, aesthetics and its own form of emotional engagement. And so, you know, really the question becomes, you know, what is the relationship between the performer and what's being sort of projected or presented that makes what you're doing unique. And then on the technical side, you know, it's the fact that there's no post-production, you know, in live performance.
Yeah.
There's no opportunity to go back and fix it later. And so whether we're dealing with, you know, with motion capture or camera tracking or, you know, or any of the other dozens of things, you know, it has to work, and it has to work sort of flawlessly, you know, at the time that that it's presented. And, you know, and so we spend a lot of time, you know, ensuring that, you know, if it's performance capture, you know, with acrobats or dancers, that people's elbows aren't bending backwards, or, you know, their hands aren't going through the floor, and, you know, all the things that, you know, on a film set, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, when your plan is to go back and do the final work, you know, afterwards, your concern is primarily around, you know, do I have enough information to be able to make informed creative decisions? Whereas in live performance, like, you know, that's it. Once the show is done, you know, the work is done. And if you haven't fixed it in prep, as they say, you know, it's not going to be fixed in the show. So
when these projects, because we're still, you know, a lot of actors, a lot of producers have not worked on this type of content. So when you have to pitch ideas to the artists or to other people, there's a bit of a gap, because you're trying to explain something they may not have seen before. if you're talking to an actor, you're trying to explain what you need to do differently. So the present, you're directing. Who can talk on sort of the experience you've had trying to pitch the idea to somebody without them actually knowing what it's about, right? There's challenges that come along with the pitching process. So that's one question. So we can talk about the pitching process, how that's had to change and how do you explain it? Like I said, with the Canucks, I had nothing to show them, but I just had to explain it to them. Like, how do you explain 360 video? It's hard. So same with virtual production. You can go, well, look at Oblivion, look at Mandalorian. Has there been sort of a gap with how you sort of pitch things to inevitably an actor or performer? Is like, by the way, we're gonna recreate you, we're gonna capture you. It's not a live performance. It's virtual. It's virtual. You're not really there. Has there been a bit of a challenge in trying to pitch and then direct people how to do a live performance or recorded performance, for that matter? So it's kind of a double question there. Sorry.
Yeah, I can comment on that. So we often have to get all sorts of stakeholders on board with using the technology, whether that's studio executives or creatives or the actual performers themselves. So we learned pretty early on, about 3 years ago, I would say that seeing live is believing. So if people can come into the showroom or the stage or wherever we have the technology set up, and they can actually play with it, break it, figure out where the limitations are, then all of a sudden they begin to get excited about the technology. If we've had limited experience during the pandemic of doing virtual demos, where I'm here in front of my like big screen TV in my living room, and so we would do demos of all the different technology here, live, like on Zoom, like just like this, and I'd have like 40 people from a different studio, asking questions and stuff. So we've tried to do it that way. We've found that live is definitely more successful. And then the recent stuff is trying to build as many case studies as we possibly can so people understand what the technology is. Unfortunately, people who don't really understand it, unless they come in live, they're probably not going to get it. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've had people who performers who, because they're getting asked to do all sorts of arbitrary stuff anyways, like their actors get asked to do all sorts of crazy stuff, use the periphery of their vision to see a cue or something like that. So once they kind of are familiar with it, we've had actors that have used it multiple times and come in and go, oh, I know everything about this. And they're talking to the XR artist who's designing the scene and asking them about this or that about the scene. It's pretty weird because that's not something that happens in post visual effects. As you can imagine, the actor never talks to like the environment artist or something, because that person is like, on the other side of the country in a dark room when they're actually working on the project. So to actually have that collaboration all together, that's been amazing, and that's been a really big help in getting people on board. Like, because me, I'm essentially like an administrator on these projects, a manager on these projects. But if I can get a creative artist who creates the scenes talking to a creative performer who's actually going to be in that environment, those two people can have a very interesting conversation. And I think that's like the most exciting part of it.
So you're finding you don't really need to pre-educate performance actors or musicians before they arrive. This is for everyone, including Renee. Do you find there's a prep period? And now with COVID, it's a lot of online. You don't, with a lot of actors with stunts, you get time to practice. So before a live performance, how do you practice for a live VR performance, for example, right? What's the education involved with the talent? How does that work?
If you want me to jump on that, to talk about Jean-Michel again, the first show he did, like in June, he was totally jumping into it without knowing anything about the media or what we would do. So he was very listening to all the developers and 3D artists and everybody, and it was quite experimental because they did something in 3 weeks. And then once he was rehearsing on his side, and we did 2-3 rehearsals with the motion capture suit, but it wasn't the same as rehearsing in front of a virtual audience. He did once put a virtual headset and have a virtual audience for one rehearsal, and then on the show, on the day, it was different. It was like having the audience and everyone. But on the other show for December, once he knew the first time how it was going, he wanted to control a lot everything and to build everything with his own thoughts and arts, because the first time he had so creative on his side as directors. And like said, Rene said, like most of the artists, once they know what it's about, the second time they want to break every rules and to say, okay, now we know the medium, I want to do it better and this way, and I have an idea. So I think many artists I knew, even before Jean-Michel Jarre, they are always very happy to jump in, a bit curious, a bit listening, and once they understand everything, they put again their artistic knowledge and who they are inside this virtual art, and they dig into it pretty easily and with a lot of enthusiasm. I haven't met the other type of artist who would be like, oh no, this is not the same, I don't like that, you know.
Yeah, so we actually had I had sort of a range of experiences with this. So when we approached the Seven Fingers, they were actually pretty enthusiastic about the possibility, though they didn't have any real experience with this kind of production. But you know, they had worked with projection before in performance, so they did have some familiarity with that. They were familiar with the work that I had done before with circuit performers and motion capture, but they were coming into it new, and so we began the process with them actually last January. And one of the great things about real time, and one of the great things about kind of where we're at in terms of where the engines are and the availability of digital assets, was that we were able to host a 4-day workshop last January, where we spent 4 days just experimenting. You know, we had 9 circus performers along with Sam from the Seven Fingers all in our studio in Vancouver. And, you know, we did about 12 completely unique scenarios with we had jugglers and acrobats and aerialists. And there were points where we could come up with an idea in the morning, spend lunchtime on the Unreal Marketplace pulling down assets, and then set up a scene that we could then practice. It wasn't, the intent here wasn't to produce any final work, but really to get a feel for and give the artists a feel for what the medium was capable of. And a lot of great stuff sort of grew out of that. Kind of at the other end of the spectrum, you know, when we began talking with Jill about doing this this show in November, you know, Jill was someone who, she sings, sort of, she's a jazz singer. She's, doesn't really watch, effect, heavy movies. She's, doesn't play video games. And for me, that's kind of what was interesting for us, is like, how do we, what can we do for and with an artist like that? And so it really, we did have her come in and, she put on the mocap suit and, had some fun, but we realized pretty early on that that wasn't the way we were going to represent her, and so almost immediately it became a story of, came about what we want to try to, accomplish creatively. And when we hit upon this idea of recreating this famous Vancouver jazz club from the 1950s and creating it as a, as a virtual space in which the performance would happen, then we were able to, all of our interaction then became, how do we recreate that experience? And it was on me and our team to figure out the technology for that. But the conversations with Jill became really about sort of iterating on what the look and feel of the place should be, and what the look of the feel of the image should be. And we, adapted this sort of 50s noir film aesthetic where everything is in black and white with film grain, even though we're doing, we're presenting it live. And the use of motion capture to create sort of ghosts of her jazz band, that performed with her, and and so that was a case where we had an artist who probably wouldn't have even considered virtual production in any form, but because we were able to sort of hit on on this idea that wasn't about the technology or virtual production, but was about a subject that we could only really create using these technologies, it made for a very sort of rich, creative process.
That's very strong. I like that kind of story. I had another one on the artistic performance I'm doing with performing art people, and I'm the VR one. So at the beginning, they were totally against technology, but now that there is a story that brings the two together, they are happy about it. And I think many artists are this way. If you bring a great storytelling that serves their cause, they would be happy. But it's a challenge.
Perfect. Does anyone else want to sort of talk on this part? What I found interesting in my experiences, I worked on, I think I called it something else, but Blood and Chrome was a Battlestar Galactica green screen feature that I worked on behind the scenes, and I got to know the actors and talk to them about the challenges they faced working on a completely green screen production. With virtual production, a lot of times you get to see what's going on, but the actors still have to imagine kind of what's going on. The live performance, you kind of have to imagine what's going on. There's a bit of imagination, and it takes a certain type of actor to have that imagination of being put in an environment that's not really there. Stype, if I could be incorrect, I want to bring you into this conversation. Do you have any technology that that you could talk about? Again, I'm not sure if you do, where the actors have something tactile to work with, so it brings it home to more of like I'm holding something or I'm touching something, where I know where I am in space and time, so that the performance can be more realistic and increased to the audience, because it's all about story. So if they're not believable, the story is not believable. Stype, is there anything you could talk about the technology production hardware side that helps the actors?
Yes. So typically that was a problem with virtual productions in a green screen, because you're standing in that big dull green room and you don't see anything, and then you have to pretend like you see all of what is displayed in virtual, and you need to feel natural in that environment. So in some projects where we collaborated, the clients were experimenting with using a projector to kind of just give a slight shade on this green screen so they see what is where, and that made their job easier. But we also saw a space there to kind of to create something that will like make this more realistic. So we designed a follower. That's our system, which is sort of like a motion capture system, but it's somewhat different than the typical system. So a follower is basically a system where you like take witness cameras, like static cameras, you mount them around in a studio on a truss, and then you have the LED beacons that you can track. I should have took one here so that I can show it to you, but it doesn't matter.
It's like a little puck, right? It's like a little round puck thing. So it's something that an actor can hold in their hands, and then basically the virtual production system knows where that object is in relation to, you know, the rest of the space, the floor, everything like that. So it's like a virtual prop.
Yeah, I could show it on a shared screen. Not sure if that's possible, but so it's like a virtual prop. You can put this beacon anywhere. For example, where it is very helpful, if I'm standing in a green screen studio, and I can put this beacon, like a small LED, which is blinking an infrared light, so which is not visible to the camera. I can put it in my pocket, and I can still be tracked by virtual cameras. So what does it mean? Now the system will know my 3D position in a set. So when I walk in front or behind the virtual object, I will be rendered correctly. So previously, if this is virtual graphics, for example, this box, so now I hold it in front of me, and then I do this, put it behind my head, but you would still see it like it's in front, although it's behind, because the computer cannot know what is in front and what is behind. But now with the follower, when we track me, and if this is tracked also, then it can render it properly, what is in front and what is behind. And so that's like one most simple use. However, we use it also for other things, like, for example, you can have an iPad. Just let me see if screen sharing is possible.
It should be possible.
But let me know if you want to do that or not. We can do it later, maybe. But for example, you can have an iPad and then make this iPad tracked. and make holograms go out of iPad. And when you press a button, this hologram can move to the floor. You can also live in like any sort of graphics. For example, if you have a virtual screen in a studio or some other prop, you just put this, you make it, you put any object. Like if you have a virtual screen, you can just use like something like this, for example, and say, this is my screen. You put a few beacons on it, and then you put graphics on it, and that's your graphics. You see a virtual TV, and then you can take it in your hands and move it like this. So that's that was our latest contribution to this space. And the most interesting part of the follower is that in that same system, you can just put those beacons on your camera and have a camera tracking module, not just the beacons, but also to track the lens position and the field of view, have it all tracked properly. So now we have one system that encompasses like most of the tracking needs, or probably all that we are aware of for virtual production.
Cool. My cinematography camera experience on set, shooting the marketing material, the documentaries, the behind the scenes stuff. I worked on a bunch of shows. One of them was Once Upon a Time, where it was a lot of green screen. So I want to touch upon and relate to virtual production on what they did there is they had QR codes, and the cameras would be tracked in space. And then they would have a real-time playback. Directors looking at what they're shooting, but they also have a layer of what they're seeing will be put in place at a lower resolution. So with virtual production, is there some sort of feedback loop, a monitor or something in real time that the actors can look at and get a real understanding of what they're doing and how it's going to look, so their performance can be enhanced or increased? Does anyone want to touch on that, whether it's Stype with technology and tracking, or is there anyone that can talk about that? Like,
I'd like to start, and then, yeah, so that's what we also provide with our systems, like a plugin for Unreal. So you can just see in Unreal what you're shooting at, how it will look. Just like you have 3 modes, previs mode, which gets you what you say, and then there's previs plus recording. So you're having a pre-visualization, but you're also recording the data. So later on in Unreal, you can just re-render at the higher res with volumetric lights and all that. And there's also playback mode just to see what you recorded. So, and this is more and more popular. Others can continue also.
Yeah, I mean, typically depending on what we're doing, we'll have, sort of large monitors that are visible to the performers during rehearsal. And generally by the time when we actually run the performance live, we hopefully have rehearsed it enough that where we can sort of see what's going out to the audience. But at that point, those aren't visible to the performers, because we don't want them to be constantly looking over at monitors when they should be performing. But it's incredibly useful both in terms of during rehearsals and the ability to immediately sort of play back a rehearsal that just happened and have the performers sort of see their performance, in the virtual space, in order to be able to sort of modulate their performance, quickly for the next time. It's just been incredibly useful for us.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's the same for me. For Jean-Michel Jarre, he wasn't having a monitor during the show. He preferred to see the virtual audience. But for rehearsals, he could. We had twice a rehearsal with the mocap capture. So then only he could see his performance and check out, oh, I could do this or that. But yeah, he was mainly checking the broadcast, how it would be screened, because the way he performs, he knows it by heart. So it's not the main point for him. It was more how we shoot this and broadcast this.
Perfect.
On our sets, we generally do have, we call it a confidence monitor, where someone has a big screen TV, they can see what's going on. However, for the LED backdrops or projection backdrops, those are in-camera composites. So the individual can look at the confidence monitor, but then after the take, they can also look at the take, a playback, and see what exactly happened. I do think that this is a place where there is some innovation that could occur. you know, if even with a really well-placed confidence cam, like, you know, you still have the problem of that wandering eye line of them checking the cam and that type of thing. And obviously that affects performance. So in my opinion, this is a place where people can innovate on. We're using traditional live stream techniques or live broadcast techniques to solve this right now. And maybe there's something better.
Perfect. We are getting close to 12:30. I've got about 2 more questions left, and then we'll go to a Q&A. We've kind of touched, I'm going to loop back just a little bit because I'm curious, sort of what are the limitations and what are the biggest challenges right now with on-set virtual production that we haven't talked, or maybe we have talked about. I just want to know, what is the biggest? Is there one big thing? Like, we talked about the lack of getting NVIDIA cards, and is it a creative? Is it a technical? What's the biggest challenge? Is it COVID? I don't know.
So one thing that I think is, you know, of many challenges, right now we're very much in, you know, kind of the hype cycle in virtual production. And as, you know, as much as we need to communicate with people what's possible with virtual production, what it is, you know, I find, you know, just as often, you know, people believe it's the solution to everything, you know, and that, you know, if they can just, you know, once we have sort of in-camera effects, you know, then we'll be done. And you know, and certainly from a live performance standpoint, you know, part of that has to be, you know, true, because obviously what we're putting in camera is what goes out. But in terms of sort of film and television production, you know, we have to be careful that we're not, you know, and to communicate that we're, you know, that we don't lose some of the advantages of having a robust post-production process, you know, gives us, right? You know, so you know, there's an incredible value to being able to sort of see, you know, on set what's going to happen. But, you know, if you're going to the point where you're doing sort of trying to get final pixels for everything on set, you're running the risk of, one, you're creating a bunch of digital assets for scenes that may get cut. You know, so you've done a whole bunch of effects work on a scene that, like, you know, once it's been shot, they're like, okay, you know, this isn't going to the movie. But then also, because you've done all this work and because you're trying to get final pixels, you know, some of the things that virtual production gives you when it's done right, which is the ability to be, you know, spontaneous and, you know, the happy accident and so forth, you start to lose because you've invested so much in preparing a scene, you know, ahead of time that, you know, and so, you know, so just to encapsulate, just one of the is really kind of effectively communicating to people, you know, the advantages and limitations of virtual production kind of before going into and setting those expectations before kind of going into a project.
I'm going to give a kind of a nerdy answer, which is something that we're actually facing right now, which is the emulation of lens optics in the virtual space. So if you imagine like an LED screen or like a screen behind an actor, there's a certain amount of physical defocus that's occurring on that screen, just from the distance of the camera to the screen. And then there is an additional defocus that is then happening in the virtual space. And those two types of defocus don't really stack with each other. They don't play nice with each other. It's not something you generally have to worry about with green screen, but with LED backdrops, you end up having a situation where you have a wide shot where the defocus looks a certain way, and then you have a close-up where the defocus looks exactly the same way. And as an audience's eye, you can tell that doesn't quite make sense from like a photon physics perspective. So trying to figure out that specific problem, which is basically, you know, we're jumping out of virtual and going into physical and having to worry about physics problems, then that's some of the challenges that we're facing. And those are the last kind of problems that need to be solved for the LED XR backdrop stuff.
Perfect.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say that on my side, the biggest challenge was VRchat, the virtual platform we used to make Jean-Michel Jarre perform, because we had at the same time the show in virtual reality and on TV. And this platform has a certain, it's very complicated to put a lot of graphic elements together, because if we do, it's too heavy. So it was a real challenge to have an interesting set graphically but not too heavy so that avatars could join and be there. So it was one of our great challenge.
Perfect. Stype, did you want to jump in, or do you think we got it covered? Is he still? I want to.
I think you have it covered. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got it. Okay, cool. So 2 more questions. And this is a very broad question. So what is the future of virtual production, whether it's hardware, performances, cost limitations? Where do you see this all going in, say, 5 or 10 years? Does anyone want to touch on that?
Okay.
Oh.
I'll take a crack at it. So I think something that we're definitely going to be seeing is a traditional, I don't know what you would call it, legacy technology companies in the entertainment space. You know, major brands that you know that are making cameras and lenses and equipment and that type of stuff, really getting strong into the virtual production space, either with a specific product line or with their entire offering. I really think that the traditional players in film and TV are now looking at virtual production as a way to extend their product offering for filmmakers, and a way to create a more streamlined offering for filmmakers. Like this move into virtual production it's not a lot of people are saying it, but it's almost like a second digital revolution happening in the film industry right now. So, you know, think of all those people who didn't take digital video seriously, and, you know, all those people that aren't around anymore. The people that took over are now people that are looking at virtual production as the next kind of step that they need to integrate with. So I think that's what's going to be coming in the next 5 years.
Anyone else want to touch on that? I know 5 years might be far ways away, but you blink and it's there.
So I think that there's a couple things. So one, I mean, there was a time when the use of projection in live performance was a new thing. And at this point, it's fairly ubiquitous, especially, among sort of larger acts, across, regardless of the sort of the genre of performance. The use of sort of live production, and even real-time projection, has become, fairly commonplace. So today, I think, at least in the live performance side, we're largely seeing, early adopters among artists who are in genres of music and so forth that have already embraced technology. And I think that over the next 5 years, we're going to see that really expand out into, artists and art forms that haven't traditionally, used sort of real-time technology and real-time. And so, from my own perspective, I think that there's, we'll see, I don't think the current users are going to go away, but I think we're going to see things that are, perhaps sort of more cinematic than psychedelic. And then the other thing I think that we're really seeing over the next few years with platforms like, whether it's Roblox or Fortnite or other sort of social immersive platforms, and we're going to see, live performance and live sort of virtual performance becoming, more and more commonplace within those platforms. Over the past year, we've seen things like the Travis Scott performance, and the John Legend, the Jean-Michel Jarre, where by the numbers are reaching audiences that are extremely broad, and certainly, when we start talking about tens of millions of people, attending these things, as Maud put it, like pretty much every musician out there is looking for, how virtual, how live streaming and virtual production fits into their, and we're going to really see how that, I think, evolve quite a bit over the next few years.
Here we already have different virtual staging definition, because on one hand, there is more what you are talking about, Chris and Rene, that are virtual stage for film industry with the green screens and Mandalorian and all that. And what Athomas and I are more talking about is performing art going into virtual reality spaces. Yeah. So it's already something different. And how I see things evolving is more and more hybrid, because we're starting to be very good at film staging, but as the video game industry is also stepping in, like Unreal, we are doing amazing things with Unreal and the Fortnite and all this video game engine. they're stepping in the filming and the entertainment space in a very strong way, making all the blurry lines between real and virtual more and more hard to tell, like this is real, this is virtual. And now we are testing even more stuff with the virtual reality. And as Stype said, there is also holographic things on the stage. So I guess we are not going to be super expert in 1 year and do the same stuff for 5 years. We're going to innovate over and over and over with new tools. And at the end, maybe it will be only holographic staging. I don't know, but it's really.
Yeah, and if you look at things like initiatives like NVIDIA's Cloud XR and so forth, the the ability to deliver extremely sort of high quality, sort of cinematic quality visuals to even lower end sort of consumer devices is becoming more and more sort of practical, and certainly will within the next few years. And so the ability to deliver extremely high quality sort of live visual immersive experiences to audiences is not going to be limited by what someone might happen to own at home, at which point we'll be able to reach pretty much anyone in the world.
Perfect. Does everyone think we got that covered? Let's get to the last question. I'm really curious what's catching everybody's eye in the industry right now. What's the thing you're like, that's interesting, that's innovative, I'm keeping an eye on that? Is there anything you guys want to point out that sort of you're keeping your eyes on, that maybe you're doing, what's coming up or what someone else is doing?
I think the recent announcement from Unreal Engine for metahumans is the biggest thing that's happened in a while. I think, thinking about our specific business, we do a lot of environments design, and we kind of nailed it on like photorealistic. Like, I'm sure that you've seen some of our work and didn't even question it. And we're kind of at that level in environment design. But amazing stuff has been done by teams like Digital Domain and ILM on humans. But you're burning $1 million plus to achieve that for a single shot, even in some cases. So to have the opportunity of like independent filmmakers, commercials, that type of stuff, actually having like photorealistic humans, that's what metahumans seems to be all about. And then there's a lot of hot stuff happening on actually making those move in realistic ways, which is kind of the last step. But a lot of character designers, I think, would say is kind of like where we need to do the last bit of innovation, is getting them moving in a very realistic and natural way. And the major innovation is happening on that. We're kind of, as an industry, we're kind of calling it virtual beings, because it's just about creating a human that isn't real. And so I think virtual beings is where a lot of the action is going to be happening in entertainment for the next few years.
And what's interesting about that is I was watching, there's agencies with virtual beings.
Yeah.
So instead of having an actor who's got an agent, you've got agencies with virtual human beings. So this is interesting. I didn't want to go down too far that rabbit hole, but it does open up a whole can of questions on, is this the future? Are actors going to be like, do we still as human beings want to interact with the Tom Cruises and know about their life? Is this the way of the future? Is it, can you talk about where this could be heading? And is it gonna, I don't want to say, start to diminish actors being on set with, AI actors, but is that a possibility?
But there's a whole ethical issue on that, because
Exactly.
even the
Exactly.
Jean-Michel Jarre project, we can play it over and over and over. We can make whatever with the avatars. And Rene said the meta-humans are a big innovation, and I totally believe that. And also in the virtual reality space, because I can be Tom Cruise like tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can be his avatar and do whatever, and that's super powerful to have new identities that are more and more realistic and be able to do virtual shows with those super innovative and realistic humans. Now they are not, it's not possible to integrate them in all the platforms in virtual reality, but this will be the next big innovation. When any video game platform would be able to have those high quality meta-humans in those, it would be a total anarchy. So we better do rules before that.
Yeah, so for me, and we could spend the next several hours or days talking about virtual beings and all the implications thereof. I think to that point, I think that once again, like if I think about the two things that I'm keeping a close eye on really are, once again, like Cloud XR, which I mentioned before, which is gets to that ability to deliver like the highest possible quality visuals and fidelity to anyone, regardless of device. And the other one is also around advances in markerless motion capture. And so if you look at kind of things like companies like Wrench and Move AI, and others are doing, the ability for us to track performers who are, in costume on stage, without, and to do that in high fidelity without putting them in, lycra suits with retroreflective or LED markers on them, I think is going to really significantly change the way we can present this stuff. So that's another one that I think is going to evolve quite a bit over the next few years, and is going to make a substantial difference.
Stype, did you want to talk about anything that you got your on, or?
Yeah, since I could do a screen share now, I could show what I was talking about if you want, which is also kind of, since this topic is now where we see the future, and this product is only about a year on the market, so it's kind of pushing some things forward. Just let me see who can share. All panelists. I got the message that I can do a screen share now, but
You have something written share down your screen normally.
Sure.
Yeah.
Green,
do you see it now?
Yep.
It's starting. It's saying your.
Yep.
Yeah. Now it's.
Oh, okay. So, for example, what I was saying is, just let me see. So I'm gonna try to. Just jump on some examples. So here is the example with an iPad, and what Ivan is showing right now is and when he puts it behind him, it's rendered properly.
Now, Stype, does he have a tracker in his pocket as well to get that occlusion happening?
Yes. So, for example, this is the mini beacon, this one that he has in his pocket. And on an iPad, we just made a mount with 4 LEDs. But we also have a pen, so you can draw in the air, you can make drawings, or just let me give you a quick. So for example, this is the example with a follower pen.
Brings presentations a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's cool.
Wow.
But then we combine it with camera tracking because we have Spider on the camera. And Spider is the name of our camera tracking model, which is also part of the follower.
That's pretty
cool.
cool.
He goes through it.
Unbelievable.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, okay, I should have prepared.
So that's the future right there, is drawing something in the air and then moving through it.
Yeah, I think the virtual production is going to simplify a lot. In the future, we are just redesigning some stuff, making it all from scratch just to make it simpler, because now it's like it's not that simple.
It will get cheaper, so I guess, with being more simple.
Yeah, with time. Yeah. We already saw a price decrease. I mean, a few years back, this was all like 5 years. What was the year was 2016. Yeah, everything was like double the price than it is right now. And I think we're going to see this trend will continue.
Cool. Let's we're almost heading up to 1 o'clock here. Let's jump to a Q&A. Are there any attendees who have any questions they want to ask the panelists?
I mean, hypnosed by your video background, Renee. Looks like very psychedelic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this was designed by one of our artists, Jen Brigham. Some motion graphics of our stuff. Definitely inspired by the Wayland Yutani kind of branding.
Perfect.
I see a bunch of open questions in the Q&A.
Yep. So let's go into this. Is for Stype or Renee. How are you approaching the actual developing of tools that kind of break down barriers for audiences?
Yeah. How do I approach the actual development tools that break
audiences.
down barriers for audiences? We're basically trying to break down barriers for the creators of the content. So how we approach the development of tools. So there are two phases. For example, in a start, you have to think of the big picture of the project that you want to make, and that is usually not you have to come up, you have to see the whole, or you have to see something similar and see how you could make it differently to achieve some goals that you see are unsatisfied currently on the market. And then when you make it, then definitely there will be user feedback, which will also guide you to which will also kind of direct the product in a bit, like the last 20%, I don't know, bug fixes or some special feature requests that you haven't envisioned, but then you realize that those are needed. So you have to start with some internal brainstorming or whatever to come up with the main idea, and then you form it as you go. And this user feedback can sometimes push you in completely other direction, but not that often. Yeah.
Perfect.
One thing that we're doing is playing with integrating live streaming chat into the Unreal Engine. So basically being able to do polls or have audience interaction, spotlighting different people that are in the chat, and then displaying that in the Unreal Engine scene that's behind the actor. So that type of thing is relevant definitely for like Twitch streams or any live streams and that type of stuff, because you can kind of create a really visual interactivity between the audience and the performer or host in that case. So that's kind of when it comes to an audience specific stuff, we don't do a lot of audience specific stuff. When it comes to audiences, that kind of stuff, so things that you might associate right now with a Twitch stream as being a 2D overlay that's happening in the Twitch stream, that could conceivably be actually something happening in the game engine. Doesn't no longer has to be like an overlay being actually happening. Could be, so that means, if the person's doing a dungeon master type of live stream or something like that, you could spawn a monster based on a chat interaction and that type of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking at for audience specific stuff.
Perfect. Another question here is directed towards Athomas. You mentioned the Circus project, and it seems really interesting intersection between live and enhanced performance. And the question is, how do you approach conceptualizing your projects or even pitching them to clients?
Yeah, when we talked about this a little bit earlier, so I won't rehash it completely, just in the interest of time. But really, at a high level, it's about discussing kind of with collaborators and clients. Really talking about it as in terms of the relationship between the performers, I talk between the performers and the projection, and really what is the story that motivates this? How are we going to use movement as a driver for the visual storytelling? And I find that when we keep it at that level, then the technology just becomes the enabler as opposed to the focus of the discussion, and you can have that discussion with with a broad range of people regardless of their their technological background.
Perfect. There's a couple of questions that seem like we've already got answers for, but maybe people have jumped on later on, so we'll just repeat because the questions come up. It says for Maud or Athomas, what was the feedback like from the performers you've worked with? The Jean-Michel Jarre, the Jill Barber, what was the feedback from the actual artists themselves that you've worked with?
So from the first experience Jean-Michel Jarre did in June, he was pretty disappointed with some parts of the technology. He really enjoyed being on a virtual set, seeing a virtual audience, but he was a bit disappointed by because it was really poor. They did this in 3 weeks. And what we did for December, he was happy with most of the part of the project, except the avatar. He wished he could have something more, not especially realistic, but more artistic with particles or something that could be really higher at a higher level, but it was pretty hard to push this inside VRchat, but still. So because Jean-Michel Jarre is the type who wants always to push further. He won't be like just satisfied. He was mainly satisfied, but he already wants to do another project that goes further. He's really obsessed by being on top of the technology side. So yeah.
Cool. And who owns the rights to this capture? Is it the performers or is it the capture studio?
Sorry?
Who
Oh
owns
yeah,
the rights?
we worked with a studio that is called Sowen. There's the one who did the neuron mockup with the Kinect system and connecting it inside the video game in real life. So they helped us a lot onto that, and they did also the artistic side of the avatar.
Yeah, I guess the question is, if someone's capturing me, for example, they're taking a synthetic replication and putting it in a virtual world. Do I own the rights to that asset of me being captured?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the type of thing you negotiate before the performance. So the avatar of Jean-Michel Jarre playing this project is the rights of himself and also the virtual company VRROOM. So both of them, they have to discuss every time they want to replay the show, and they both own some rights on that.
Yeah, because I think even in the music industry, I mean, Michael Jackson didn't own his music for quite some time, and I think even the Beatles was owned by Michael Jackson for a while. So it really depends on what you negotiate. I think this is probably the same thing. Would that be fair to say?
And it's a very tough questions, because I have friends who are trying to build a virtual reality karaoke with the stars' avatars, but they need the right of the music of the stars themselves and the mastering house. So that's like 4 different rights owner before you can do something. It's really a huge process.
That'll be interesting to watch. I used to long time ago shoot stock footage, and then it got into like, well, who owns the right to the house? So people started arguing, you can't shoot my house in the neighborhood because I own the rights to that house, right? There's some, the Eiffel Tower, the Opera House in Australia, you can't go take a picture of it and sell that picture. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion down the road how that's going to work. This you have to negotiate if you're being captured. You have to negotiate that up front. Who owns that? Yeah. Sorry, this might be an easy or might be hard question, but I'll ask it anyways. How do you tell a client that using real-time technology might not be a good idea?
Usually the main reason why we shy away from a project is because there isn't enough time. They want something like in a week or 2 or something like that. So I think it's important for people to understand that real-time virtual production, everything is done ahead of time. You can't push it to post. And that's a huge part of the way that you're going to strategize and plan that production. I speak for everyone here. We love to have lots of time. We kind of quote 6 to 8 weeks is like a really nice amount of time for us. Some people like more than that, but 6 weeks is pretty tight to do something like this. We've done it many times, but I think that's how you say it is you say, gosh, we don't have enough time to do this on the next one. All our pricing, everything that it takes. So you're going to nail it on the next one, but not on this one.
I think that's perfect. You kind of just let it go. So another question is, I saw a demo from some of Stype's tools. I think it's called Follower. How does that kind of real-time tech influence how people can interact with graphics in real time, for example, newscasts or maybe sports performances?
I think I just showed an example.
Yeah. Is there any
in
more
my screen
for news or?
yeah. Okay, just let me load it and maybe you can go with some other question until I prepare it.
Sure. I
until
think that would be probably the last question, and I think we'll wrap it up.
More pressure on your shoulders.
No pressure. But
Yeah.
I like how the camera movement was able to go through that. So automatically my brain went, in the future, can a presenter at a conference, if you're looking at conferences, if you're trying to explain something at a very big conference, whether it's Oculus, Connect, or whatever, the performer, you know how we have, the big stage with a screen in the background, can you actually have a pen that you draw something and in space it floats so you can, we've seen 3D assets being dropped into a virtual world. Can you now bring that at conferences and spin that around? It's a live performance, right? Can you start bringing these assets, newscasts and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Conferences and presentations.
I think a lot of this technology did start in the live event space. A lot of the stuff that we're doing, particularly in LED virtual backdrops, we're pulling a lot from live events, particularly when it comes to the setup of the hardware, like the actual LED screens and that type of stuff. All those folks are from the live event space.
Awesome. How are we doing there, Stype?
Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just searching for this where we were showing something like a news that you were interesting. So this is like the election poll, and now he's just showing what the problem can be with this. Okay, now he took the polls in his hand, so to make it more dramatic, the shot, and then okay, I'm gonna press a button to. Let me see.
Well, while you find that, Stype, I just want to bring to everyone's attention, I saw something really cool. It was the Weather Channel was using immersive media to show how a flood, how it looked. If it was a tidal wave, if it was a tsunami, how it would look. They can actually recreate how something would look in a real technology. So I think that really brings to the audience, it influences them with the graphics of how real something can be or how it will look in the future, right? So that's one example.
This is now one example how it doesn't work well because he's not tracked. And now Monica will come. And Monica is tracked, so. You mean full screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So now Monica walks through it and then she's in front. My problem is that I can't see the progress bar when I'm full screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Stype, is there must be some type of depth keying happen on this because the occlusion is pretty tight on her body.
Yeah, that's a chroma key here. There's also like, I don't want to just be pitching our products, but we developed a pretty good chroma key here also that can extract shadows.
No, I mean, like as she's walking through the 3D object, there's no green screen on her. So like as she's walking through the object, it's occluding it pretty well. I don't know if people were able to see that, but
this is shot in a green screen.
I understand that, but that still doesn't explain the full.
The thing is, she's tracked by the follower, So now the Unreal knows that she's behind the graph, but as she walks forward, as we track her position, you'll see when she steps a few steps forward, she will, she just is rendered in front.
Perfect.
So, I hate to do this, folks, but I actually have a 1 o'clock meeting.
Yeah, and I think we got to wrap up. So I want to thank all our panelists and everyone watching here today. Thanks to our speakers, Athomas, Renee, Maud, and Stype. The one thing I didn't mention is I also have a company called Mastering 360 where we have a boot camp coming up that teaches VR 360 filmmaking later this year. I will drop an email in here, info@mastering360.com. If any of our speakers want to be reached out to and want to put in their contact info, feel free. And if anybody watching wants to contact them, that's a way for everyone to sort of connect. Thanks again for everyone joining us. Appreciate everyone being here and thanks for everyone for their time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.